Hello, my name is Nicholas Morgan. I'm an editor at Ahval News, and this is Turkey Abroad. Joining me today is Marta Ottaviani. She is the author of How Erdogan Changed Turkey. Marta, welcome to Turkey Abroad.
Thanks for the invitation and good morning to you all.
So I want to ask you something about your work, actually, and how it really relates in any way to the allegations we're getting now the past month or so from Sedat Peker, the mafia boss out of Dubai, who's pointing the finger at a number of members, high-ranking members of President Erdogan's government. And in his last video, he took aim at Erdogan himself when he said, quote, "I was there when you had no power," unquote. And he already made it clear he's planning another video about President Erdogan by the time after June 14th. And you literally wrote the book on President Erdogan's rise and his impact on Turkey over the years. So what do you think when you hear that Sedat Peker could be speaking about?
Well, let's say that I'm watching with a great attention all the videos Sedat Peker posts on YouTube. We don't know if the allegations that Sedat Peker made are real or not. It is very difficult to demonstrate. But I think that Sedat Peker is giving us a strong message. We are back in the 90s. I mean, there are several links between mafia and political power in Turkey. And we must not forget that this is something Erdogan promised to stop when he got the power in 2002. So we can experience, even under this point of view, how Erdogan tried to present himself like something new on the Turkish political arena, but is behaving in the same way of the political past, and actually is doing worse than other political leaders like Necmettin Erbakan, just to talk about a leader Erdogan knew very well, which is the father of political Islam in Turkey. And this is very scary. This is very scary, not only for the internal point of view, because this is the demonstration that there are several links between mafia and the state power in Turkey, but it is very scary and worrisome for the whole Mediterranean region, because in the last video, Sedat Peker told that he helped the Turkish government to deliver weapons to al-Nusra. And this is the confirmation that Erdogan is helping several groups in order to make the situation in the Mediterranean region trickier and trickier and more difficult to sort it out.
One of those points I'd actually like to single out that you mentioned is that President Erdogan, when he became prime minister in 2002, a big part of that platform was rooting out organized crime, going after gangsters, professionalizing Turkish law enforcement along European models. And to me, when you put that image next to what we're hearing now, where suddenly the mafioso character has all of the inside information that he's now leaking out to the world, it's very stark putting it side by side. So, but has Erdogan or anyone else that is in his, or has anyone else around him really been so close to any of these mafia figures' orbit? And have you ever come across any of these kind of like allegations before that President Erdogan might have had connections to these kind of figures in his political career?
Well, for me, it is not a surprise, personally speaking, because it is not the first episode in which a mafia leader or a person close to mafia environment makes such a kind of allegations. We must not forget that the Erdogan's governments were in the center of a very serious accusation about corruption. And I'm sure that behind this corruption, there were also links with stay behind organizations. The point is that is another to me. Now the situation is more dangerous for internal Turkey and not only internal Turkey. Why? Because before there was a more balance of power. After the presidential reform, Erdogan got the absolute power, apparently, but it is forced to share this absolute power with all these mafia leaders and all this kind of organization that can influence his own politics, not in Turkey, but also abroad. For example, in last September, there were very interesting rumors, and according to these rumors, the Erdogan's behavior in Nagorno-Karabakh was also to praise, to satisfy some ultra-nationalist organizations that were involved in a way in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and they were pushing Erdogan to come closer to Azerbaijan, moving war towards Armenia. And this is an example about how this organization can influence the Erdogan's ruling. But if, for example, we think about the very dangerous, very delicate situation in the East Mediterranean, we can suppose maybe that in the near future, this ultranationalist organization will push also Erdogan to be more and more confronting with Greece and with the European Union because of the energy resources in the East Mediterranean. So it is something that apparently regards only Turkey, but in the reality, it is a problem for the whole region because Erdogan has the target, wants to become a more and more powerful leader, a reference for the whole Muslim in the Mediterranean region. And the point is that he's not leading the country alone. Even if apparently he has such an immense power, he has to share this power with really poor, very poor, reliable people, and I personally very worried about that, also because, also regarding what can happen inside Turkey at the next elections.
I would like to come back to some of these points a little later in the conversation, particularly this interconnect between the ultranationalist organizations and the Turkish mafia and what that really says about the relationship it has with the government to influence policy like that. But I would also like to just go back a little further too, because you wrote a very extensive book really that detailed the rise of President Erdogan, including some from the time before he became prime minister in 2002. So with that, I want to ask you a question: is who was Erdogan basically before he became the famous name that we all know right now? What can you tell us about this early political involvement, and just how that all shaped him into the president that we have today?
Well, first of all, we have to distinguish Erdogan in the 90s and Erdogan when he founded the AKP, the Adalet ve Kalkınma Partisi. So the party he has been leading since 2002, and that with this party is ruling Turkey since 2002. Erdogan in the 90s was a very smart guy, coming from a very poor family. And he was, as we can say, the favorite young politician, the promise of Turkish politics of Necmettin Erbakan. As I told before, Necmettin Erbakan is the founder, the leader of the political Islam in Turkey. And Erdogan was a very promising young politician. But Erdogan understood something. Erdogan understood that he had to change the way to communicate his political message in order to get the power and in order to avoid trials, several trials that fortunately encountered Erbakan, because we know that 3 parties founded by Erbakan were shut down from the Constitutional Court because Turkey was not a perfect democracy. Turkey has always had some problems in his democracy model. But let's say that before there was at least a kind of balance of power, and because there was the President of the Republic before the constitutional reform, and there was a Prime Minister, and there was a more powerful parliamentary, and unfortunately all these things are not in charge in Turkey nowadays. And also the judiciary was how can I say, if not more independent than today, definitely more free in dealing with the power, because today, unfortunately, we see that there are a lot of judges and prosecutors who are also very young, so they do not have the experience required to conduct very sensitive trials like the one against the so-called failed coup in 2016. So Erdogan understood that in order to avoid problems with the judiciary, he had to change the way to communicate his political message. And he created basically a new party with the prospect of the entry in the European Union, a very strong economic program. And in that time, Erdogan was supported by many politicians that now are against him. For example, Ali Babajan, which is also a very respected economician. And not to mention Abdullah Gül, which is not officially against Erdogan, but he does not want to be involved anymore in Turkish political arena. And he was a very charismatic leader, of course, with a very weak opposition on the other side. I would like to remember that the JEP in that political period was led by Deniz Baykal, who was a total ineffective political leader of the opposition. And also from the Kurdish side, the Kurdish party was not organized as before, as today. What I want to mean? I want to mean that they had more links than today with the PKK, and they had a less strong political platform. So Erdogan basically had not really powerful political alternatives in order to win the elections or to meet an effective opposition during his electoral campaign. And he was very well sponsored by a lot of businessmen who founded his political and economical program trustable, reliable. And that's why Erdogan was able to win 2002, 2007, and 2007 elections. And something I want to remark, because it is very important, till 2008 to 2009, Erdogan was voted even from people totally far from his political positions, because he was quite an inclusive leader. Not for me. I have to state that I always been very doubtful towards Erdogan policies. But I was living in Turkey at that time. I spoke to several people, and all these people told me they were voting for Erdogan because Erdogan was something of different than the Turkish politics before. It was something new. He delivered a total new political message and a total new economic program. Also, we have to say that during the first period of the Erdogan's ruling, Turkey experienced a very important economic growth, and a lot of foreign companies came to Turkey in order to invest and open branch. And this had a real impact on everyday's life and the personal wealth of people. And I think that people decided to vote Erdogan, first of all, because he was a very pragmatical leader. And in order to vote for him, they decided to underestimate the real political message of Erdogan, which is unfortunately the one he started to show, let's say, after 2011, in my personal opinion, and above all, after the Gezi Park revolt.
And every politician basically has a story that they want to tell to sort of explain their path to forming their political beliefs. They all want to have a story to go along with their political and intellectual upbringing. Like, for example, here in the United States, President Joe Biden frequently speaks about growing up middle class in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and his involvement within the community in Delaware. President Putin in Russia talks about his rough upbringing in St. Petersburg, and of course, we always hear of his background in the KGB. But what about President Erdogan? There seems to be a lot of question marks over his early history, like in the 1970s, where there's rumors that he worked a number of odd jobs, including as a bodyguard at some point. And this is a period where he was still in high school or just beginning in university, which itself, there's a question mark on whether he was able to attend the university and get a diploma or not. But during this earlier period of time for President Erdogan, say the 70s going into the 80s, what do we know? What do we know about him? During this time, was he involved in any way with, say, potential like gangs or any other kind of corrupt elements during that period? Because just to finish off this question, I had other guests who explained that during the 1970s, that was the period where the Turkish mafia and organized crime began to take shape, and it had relations to the stay-behind organizations during the Cold War, and just the political landscape at the time. So, what can you tell us here?
Well, unfortunately, there are not very reliable sources of information about the first years of Erdogan. We can say easily that is very linked to Rize, to the Black Sea, and let's not forget that a lot of stay-behind, ultranationalist and mafia organizations are linked to the Black Sea as well. Yeah, it is. So there is in Turkey the so-called Black Sea Mafia. This does not mean that Erdogan had concrete links with his mother, and less close to his father, which was a very tough man, apparently, a very severe father. But we know that also Erdogan is very linked to the Black Sea, to Rize, basically the hometown of his family. And we know that also a lot of controversial businessmen and a lot of mafia organizations come from the Black Sea as well. So these could not be... Yeah, in Turkey there is the so-called Black Sea Mafia. So this could not be just only a coincidence. What we know for sure is that during the first years of his political career, Erdogan was very, very careful doing the right relations with emerging businessmen. and especially in Anatolia, the so-called Anatolian tigers. And they are businessmen who paid for his electoral campaigns, and they are the businessmen who benefit mostly when Erdogan got into the power. And we are talking about businessmen not only in the Anatolia, but also on the Black Sea region. So if I cannot say that Erdogan had personal relation with this mafia leader, but of course we can say that he always been very careful in dealing with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's one other portion that I'd like to ask you about during this period of his life as well, and that's his Islamist roots. When we know that he is a politician who can be categorized as a political Islamist. He had his involvement with Erbakan's movement, which paved the way for him to become mayor of Istanbul, and then, of course, eventually a founder of the Justice and Development Party. But how did he reach this point? How did he become an Islamist intellectually?
Okay, he studied a lot during his youth, and he was very linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's why he nurtured this interest in political Islam. But let's not forget that there are an intellectual point of view, but also a very pragmatic point of view. Erdogan is an ambitious person. Erdogan wanted to get the absolute power, first for himself, and then, of course, to spread the message of political Islam in Turkey. Let's not forget that he was like a son to Necmettin Erbakan. Necmettin Erbakan saw in Erdogan the future of political Islam in Turkey. And my personal view is that Erbakan continued to see in Erdogan this kind of light, even after they split up, because in the end, Erdogan split up from the party of Erbakan. Erbakan founded the Saadet parties. Erdogan founded the AKP. But we can see so far, we can see even nowadays a kind of legacy between Erdogan and Erbakan. When Erdogan opened Santa Sofia, Hagia Sophia, as a mosque last year, for some analysts, was the last gift from Erdogan to Erbakan and that Turkey of Erbakan, the Turkey in the 70s, when Erbakan tried to not to open Santa Sofia as a mosque, but at least to put on the table the question of the topic of Santa Sofia reopened as a mosque. And so I think that there is in a way still a very strong relation between Erdogan and his former legacy. But of course, during the years, he became more and more ambitious. And if till 2009, we can say that his ambition regarded only his power in Turkey. Unfortunately, after the appointment of Ahmet Davutoglu as Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the 1st of May 2009, it became clear that Erdogan had an international projection, unfortunately, and it wanted to become a political point, a political reference for the whole Muslim world, especially the one living on the European soil.
And there's another portion of his career that I'd like to ask you for some thoughts on, and that is to when President Erdogan was serving as mayor of Istanbul, which was during a time when Erbakan was he was traveling the path to becoming prime minister before being deposed in a coup in 1997. And during that time period, I was speaking to an expert recently who was telling me that there were some allegations of conflict of interest or corruption at play through a public tender system known I believe it was called the pool system that Erdogan was running to raise funds for specific projects from businessmen in the city. And a number of these businessmen he would go on to favor in issuing these tenders, which resonates a lot since we hear this frequently today still. But during that time period, when you were researching Erdogan's career at that point, did you come across any number of corruption allegations at that time that were significant?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look at the opposition newspapers that time, and in those years there were much more press freedom than nowadays in Turkey. You can read a lot of articles written by very famous journalists denouncing the links between Erdogan and businessmen, especially in the contractor sector. And of course, Erdogan has been always linked to corruption accusations and allegations since the first years of his political careers. But we have to tell also something, because it is very interesting to understand the Erdogan's behavior. He's also a very pragmatic person. For example, when I speak to people living in Istanbul, they always reply me this. Turkish politicians have always been corrupted. But the difference between Erdogan and these politicians is that Erdogan has done also a lot of things for Istanbul. He is remembered as a very good mayor. If you look at the transportation map of Istanbul today, most of the projects were inaugurated, if not inaugurated, but projected and sponsored during the Erdogan's ruling of Istanbul. So it's like if there is a gentleman agreement between Erdogan and Turkish electorate. You can do whatever you want, but Turkey must work. And so far, this gentleman, not written agreement, has worked properly. We will see how it will be in the future, because Turkish economy is doing very bad. Definitely not good as before. And also Erdogan coped with the coronavirus emergency very badly. And definitely not in a very transparent way, as Putin did also in Russia. So we'll see at next elections how it will be the outcome, and also before who will be the candidates for these elections. But I'm sure it will be the most difficult elections in the Erdogan's career.
Mm-hmm. And one of those candidates may very well be Ekrem İmamoğlu, as many analysts suspect, the current mayor of Istanbul. And you still hear actually some of those echoes of the coziness between AKP stewards of Istanbul after Erdogan and many businessmen, and the kind of pay to play sort of environment. And it created some actually tension early on for İmamoğlu when he began investigating some of those contracts to determine what was actually going on. And he was prevented from doing so by the city council and other local politicians who were still members of the AKP, from my understanding. So it's an interesting dynamic there. The last thing I'd like to ask you, though, Marta, is, now that we know that Sedat Peker is going to be speaking again about Erdogan in the coming weeks, he made it explicitly clear that he plans it for after June 14th. And at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about how the erosion of separation of powers inside of Turkey and of Turkish political institutions just exasperates this entire problem, maybe opened the door to these mafia figures having some sway with the government. Is that what you think is the main message, the main takeaway, so to speak, of the Sedat Peker videos is just that Erdogan, the reformist, has presided over a long period of boom for Turkey, and then eventual authoritarianism that's reaching something of an apex at this point. But at the same time, he just turned Turkey's future now, or Turkey's present rather, resembles its past, where you have a new deep state colluding with a new set of mafia figures.
Well, I think that the main challenge to Erdogan is still the economy. If the Turkish economy recovers, then I think that Erdogan can stay, how can I say, quite comfortable in charge. Also because we must not forget something. The opposition, on the other hand, there are very different souls in the opposition, and and all these souls that not cope, they not cooperate between themselves. Allow me only to remember E-Party and EDP, or the Saadet Partisi and the JP, the Republican Party of Turkey. So I think that if the Turkish electorate has to choose, the economy recovers, they will choose the continuity, because we must not forget that Erdogan gave something that Turkey never saw. He gave 20 years of stability, and he gave 20 years basically of a positive economic situation, and he gave at least 10 years in which Turkey, at least according to pro-government Turkish press, the sentiment towards Turkey grew up in the Mediterranean region, and Turkey made Turkey a more respected country abroad, which does not exactly works in this way. But this is what the national press says, and you know better than me that now there is no press freedom left in Turkey almost. So if the economy recovers, I think that Turkish people will choose Erdogan again. But of course, one day Erdogan will finish to lead Turkey, and in that way, I expect huge troubles, not only regarding the so-called Kurdish questions, which is unfortunately in a desperate situation, but also all the segments of power that stay behind the organization cooked during the Erdogan's ruling, and the opposition, when they will get the power, if they will be able to do so, they will have to cope also with this aspect. Just a word on Ekrem İmamoğlu. I interviewed him immediately after his elections. I think he's a very smart man, of course, definitely an interesting opposition figures, but I think that one thing is lead properly Sultan Bailey. The other thing is being capable of leading Turkey, and also to gain the confidence of businessmen and other cycles near the political life, as Erdogan did. And if Ekrem İmamoğlu or the JP manage to do that, maybe he will have a chance. But I think it is yeah, it is still early to talk about that. Of course, we will talk about that in the upcoming months.
Well, in the upcoming months, if that ends up entering the agenda, I will happily have you right back here on Turkey Abroad to go into it. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Marta, for taking the time to join Turkey Abroad today.
That was my pleasure.
My pleasure as well. And I look forward to getting a chance to look at your book as well.
Okay, thank you very much, and good luck to Turkey Abroad, but also good luck to Turkish people still in Turkey and maybe willing to go abroad.
In that case, I guess I would see you in Istanbul sometime soon, hopefully in the future.
Yes, let's really hope. And above all, let's hope that we will be able to come to Istanbul safe and sound, not only regarding because of the coronavirus situation, but also the pressures on foreign journalists.
Here's to a future without COVID and more press freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So have a good day.
Take care, Marta. My name is Nicholas Morgan, and this is Turkey Abroad.